But I'm sure most people who've been following my channel at the very least are understanding of this. There's a rail strike going on. It's been big news over in the UK, and the rightoid media have been absolutely pissing and shitting their pants over it because it's shown that there is strength in collective bargaining to be able to get better conditions for workers' rights with regards to what's happening in the UK right now, considering the cost of living crisis, considering the impacts of inflation and what's going on with regards to wage stagnation that we've had over the past 10 years due to a large decline in union membership. So that has thrust people into the limelight and thrust the discussion about strikes and the discussions about unions well into the public discourse. Now, Darren Grimes is he's quite the pundit, right? So he started off as being like an independent, like right-wing pundit on YouTube, I believe it was. Might be on YouTube, might be on Twitter. I forget exactly his original origin story. But I think he was originally a Lib Dem as well. He's basically like a big grifter in the UK. And he had basically been begging to be a panelist on the new kind of UK Fox News called GB News. And he got the spot that he wanted. Darren Grimes is indeed the crafty wank guy, great night, Jay. Yeah, he is. So he essentially will parrot whatever the conservative line is. Like, his YouTube channel is funded by a shell company that is owned by the son of an old MEP. So he has loads of like money that gets like a Brexiteer MEP, to be clear. So he has loads of like money coming into him, but he's trying to market himself as being grassroots when he's really not. So he has takes that essentially any old rightoid would have. He imports takes from the United States. It's pretty low level like rightoid media analysis, but whatever. The content got a content, so he's done a video about why the rail strikes are wrong, and actually involving his TikTok accomplice, Jessica Gill, who is an ANCAP of all things. So it'll be really interesting to see the discussion that they have about the rail strikes and see if we can have a good reaction to it. Let's have a look.
Not about workers. This is about, as I say, power and control.
Darren, what
Grime time? What? Why would you call your segment grind? That doesn't make any sense to me. I guess he's got people he probably pays to help him with his branding. So what do I know? I just, if it was me and I was called Darren Grimes, I would not call my segment Grime Time.
do you think about what's going on recently? You hear a lot about people being able to go to their work, being unable to go outside. It's like we're back in lockdown again. Do you think these people are working on the tube, on the trains? Do you think they should be striking? And do you think it's fair for the rest of the country?
You know, I was thinking about this this morning because my mother, funnily enough, was just asked for her views via a vox pop, you know, with someone with a microphone from a news channel asking her for her view. And she's a woman that makes little over minimum wage, right? It's a tough old job she does, working with kids. Now, Jess, she's not seen any pay rise that's keeping up with inflation, right? She's among some of the least well-off people in Britain, in the Northeast. And I was thinking about this in the context of a train driver, right? You're talking, what, maybe 60 grand? It's more.
Right, so it must be important to point out, first of all, here that it's not the train drivers primarily that are on strike, and they're not even covered by the RMT. The majority of train drivers are covered by ASLEV. The actual strike is mostly due to support staff, maintenance staff, ticket office clerks, things like that, people who are covered by RMT. The median salary of these people is £31,000, which is similar to the median salary for people in the UK. Some of the people represented are on minimum wage, so him kind of contextualizing this amongst kind of the right-wing kind of narrative in the media at the moment, which is the idea that the train drivers are well off, so they shouldn't need to ask for a pay rise. When first of all, it's not the train drivers asking for a pay rise. Second of all, who cares? They're entitled to collectively bargain anyway. And also, the strike isn't just about pay. It's also about cuts to the pensions. It's about conditions that are being worked under. It's about the potential for redundancies, and it's about changing of contracts and what's happening moving forward with regards to fire and rehire. So it's not just about pay. And it's not even about train drivers who aren't even covered by the union. That is the head of the talks for the reasons why the strike action is going ahead. This is a blatant lie to start with about the actual issue of the situation. And then, as you know, the person in chat whose name I can't pronounce is pointing out as well, like the idea that just because the train drivers are asking for additional kind of pay increases with inflation, and everyone else isn't, means that there should be a race to the bottom in which nobody asks for any pay rises just because some people who are slightly better off than some others are asking for it and some aren't. I was like, well, no, hang on. The argument should be everyone should get a pay rise. If you are being frustrated by the fact that you're on minimum wage and you're not getting a pay rise, how about you join a fucking union? How about you use your powers of collective bargaining to fight for a better wage for yourself, rather than you talking smack about people who are using everything within their powers to A, get additional pay increases, and also B, as JDM rightly points out in chat, about issues of safety, issues of pension provision, issues of changes to contracts and fire and rehire, which is what the strike is actually about, rather than just train drivers' pay, which seems to be the right-wing lie about the strikes, is that it's train drivers' pay.
Than a nurse.
And yeah, the same comparison, like, oh, well, they're getting paid more than a nurse, so a nurse doesn't go on strike. Yeah, where were you when there was a campaign from the left wing of the Labour Party wanting to see nurses get a 12.5% pay rise? The ones that we clapped for, throughout the entirety of the pandemic for being key workers, apparently, they need to be the bottom of the race to the bottom as well. Like, but as soon as other people in the public sector ask for a pay rise, suddenly now there's a narrative that you can spin where suddenly nurses do need a pay rise, even though you were against it when there was a campaign for it, is mind-blowing to me.
Button, Jess? And I think they're making the strongest case, the best representation that any hardline Thatcherite pro-privatisation Tory MP could ever possibly hope to make for the automation of the entire network, right? For actually taking the train network and modernising it to such an extent where these things can drive themselves. And you've got to think, if something can drive itself, Jess, it can't be that hard. So I'm just thinking, this has got to...
Spoken by someone who has an entirely all-encompassing knowledge of how the rail network works there. Darren Grimes is certainly an expert. Yeah, I personally want those who are taking care of me when I'm hospitalized to be underpaid, burnt out, and sleep deprived. Well, like exactly, like there was a case I've talked about on stream before. Actually, there was a little kid who died from sepsis because the nurse who was dealing with his issue was understaffed. There was issues with like the technology that they were working with, which was difficult to be able to interpret, and then because there was this person was overworked and understaffed. This kid died because his sepsis wasn't correctly diagnosed, and they tried to sue this nurse. Right, she ended up partially losing her nursing license for a bit because the public outcry about it was never about any kind of systemic issue with the funding of the NHS or the ability of the nurses to be able to do a good job based upon the actual situation that they're in. But the whole narrative was spun was being this nurse is bad because it's her fault, when it was the mistake was going to happen inevitably with an antiquated system and an overworked nursing force. Was she? I think she might have been a junior. I think you're right, JDM. I think she was a junior. But the consultant that was supposed to be on duty had gone home and not been replaced. Someone Riordan, I think the name was, if I remember correctly. But this desire that everyone has to have, there needs to be an individual to blame, rather than the failings of some kind of systemic pressures. Cucked into outrage against intervals by the right-wing press, classic true.
Be about something else. And I think what it is about control. I think it's about saying, well, we've seen over the last 4 elections now that the Labour Party can't win. The Labour Party know that they can't win without Scotland, right? So they're not going to win Scotland anytime soon. The SNP still very much have Scotland in a chokehold of their yellow separatist nonsense.
I mean, I don't think that that's a correct assumption there, Darren. I think there is definitely a lot of people who vote SNP purely on independence grounds, and that's one thing that they would always stake their mask to with regards to voting SNP. But in general, the SNP have a huge majority in Scotland, both in Holyrood and in Westminster, because they actually speak to the economic material needs of people in Scotland. They are more left-wing in Scotland than we are in England, right? And they don't like the Conservatives. They never have liked the Conservatives. And it was the kind of the shift towards neoliberalism that Ed Miliband parroted when he was leader of the Labour Party. Why they turned so greatly against voting Labour in Scotland and voted for the SNP instead. Like, it wasn't purely down to the kind of independence vote. There was a big shift when they realised that there was a huge divide in Westminster. And again, something about there's quite a lot of devolution that's been given to Scotland that's made the idea of independence a lot less likely, because they get a lot of the things that they want from policy passed down by Holyrood. Yeah, that's very true, Zio, yeah.
So you consider all of that, and I think that this is again, it goes back to that point I just made earlier. It's about these hard left, anti-democratic trade unions.
Anti-democratic trade union? They're literally like a democratic body in themselves. They're far more democratic in the way in which they go about their decisions than I don't know, like a representative parliament. That's a really weird accusation for a trade union. They literally voted to strike, right? They have to, and even then, because of the trade union laws, they have to have a certain amount of turnout and a certain amount of a percentage of the votes to be able for the strike action to go ahead. So they're incredibly democratic. That's a really weird accusation.
Seeking to actually control the voters of this country because they know they can't win. They can't win them.
Control them how, Darren? What control are they? This is an incredibly strange, like, conspiratorial opinion that Darren has here. I'm really confused with what he's trying to say here. Yeah, far more strict than general elections, JD. Very true.
Their man, their ultimate man, their prized possession in that commie Jezza Corbyn, they couldn't win with him.
Yes, famous communist Jeremy Corbyn.
So now they say, well, let's choke off the country's rail network, right? The economy will suffer, working people will suffer.
Hang on a minute, no, but they've already said, they've explicitly said in plenty of interviews, and we've also heard from Mick Lynch, directly from the horse's mouth, that they want to engage in negotiations. The companies are expected to want to go into negotiations. It's been clearly demonstrated in the media, which is not pro-union at all, that Grant Shapps has reneged on his duties as Transport Secretary to be able to allow these companies to want to actually engage in the negotiations with the RMT to avoid the strike action. There have been other strikes that have gone on. For example, the bin men in Chesterfield, they've agreed a 7.5% pay rise and have avoided strike action. Right? There's plenty of scenes that we've seen of union disputes not actually having to go towards strike action because there's been some kind of agreement that's been reached. Like, not even a pay rise with inflation; it's a below inflation pay rise that's been agreed and has been settled. And it's Grant Shapps reneging on his duties as Transport Secretary, which is why we don't have a settlement and why the trucks are going ahead. This is crazy conspiratorialism from Darren here.
So much will suffer. Kids doing their exams, Jess, they will suffer. Who wins? Well, not the.
What you're saying is that these people are essential, these workers. Yeah, take a shot every time a right-wing pundit mentions Corbyn out of fucking nowhere. Very true, great night, Shay.
Conservative government. So it's that manipulation of a really important economic network. This is the biggest strike since Margaret Thatcher was in power. It's an attempt to overturn a democratically elected government. It's about power.
What? They just want to get paid. They just want to not have their pensions raided. Like, what? I mean, again, obviously, Darren Grimes is a grifter. We know he is a grifter, right? He has previously just completely counteracted all of his previous points. He'll just say whatever he thinks will get him, like, the favour of the right-wing media because he wants to get a career out of it. Is why he was absolutely fucking desperate. He was desperate to get a spot on GB News and would literally just say whatever he thought would be able to get him that spot, right? I don't think we're going to really take whatever he says here as being his verbatim opinions, but there we go.
And it's about control. And I think it's wrong. I have absolutely no time for it whatsoever, Jess. And I know that puts me against public opinion. A Comres poll out today showed that actually a majority of Brits support the strikes. I think that's fundamentally mistaken. If rail workers get 11%, which is inflation right now, people are struggling.
They're not asking for 11%. They're asking for 7.5%.
If they get an 11% pay increase, we'll have to give everyone else an 11% pay increase. Jess, what does that end up doing? Well,
I mean, if there was actually a wage price spiral going on, then you might have an argument. But this is a supply chain crisis issue. That's why interest rates going up really isn't going to solve the issue that we're having with inflation right now. What we actually need to just see is the ability for people to engage in consumption.
Basic economics suggests that actually you do that, all you end up doing is exacerbating inflation. You make things worse, right? So you've got to do it again. Pay continues to be outstripped by inflation until you get control of the money supply, right? Until
But this
interest.
isn't a money supply issue. Like, there's plenty of countries that have seen the same increase in M2 money supply that we have, that haven't had the inflationary pressures that we have, because it's a supply chain problem. It's an issue with the fact that we rely so heavily, especially on things like energy imports and food imports from Eastern Europe, that we're seeing the price increases that we have now. It's nothing to do with M2 or the money supply. I understand these people fucking choke on Milton Friedman's dick, but there's just no evidence to say that that's the case. I've just come back from Greece, where they are self-sufficient in a lot of the produce that they can grow, and the oil kind of energy sector that they depend on isn't as reliant on imports as we are, and they've only seen 1.5% inflation, despite the fact that they did engage in additions to the money supply during the pandemic. There's just no evidence that this is the case.
Rates go up, so people's mortgages start to become really hard. Debt repayment becomes really hard. You can't do it. So it would be a fool's errand. It's hard, but I'm afraid, this is what happens, just dare I say it, when you lock down an entire economy for 2 years, on and off, more times than a light switch. This is what happens. Spending money like it's coming out of a tree somewhere in the Treasury, number 11 Downing Street. It's not. You know it, I know it, and deep down, I think most people know it, Jess.
No, there's no evidence for it. I understand this is essentially that these people's ideology is just punish poor people for no reason. We have to be able to contort the facts of the issue to match their ideological position.
I think this just shows the reality of socialist ideology, because socialism.
I mean, this is a person who called. I mean, Jess Gill on Twitter called the Tories socialists, so it'd be interesting to hear her opinion.
Involves putting the worker first, but socialists don't understand that every worker is also a consumer. And if you look at what's happening now, people who rely on the trains, rely on the tube, aren't able to get that service. And so they're worse off. It's not really pro-worker in that sense, because what about all the other jobs? And it's interesting looking at the Labour Party right now. You have got the Corbynites, but Keir Starmer seems to be not really on the side of the people on strike. Why do you think that is?
Well, on the first point, the pro-worker slant, I've never heard, frankly, so much bollocks in all my life, if I'm allowed to use such language on this channel. I really, really find it baffling that someone like the leaders of these trade unions, with their lovely homes, massive mortgages.
I mean, I don't think it's correct, JDM, to say that the MMT that they engaged in didn't necessarily cause an inflationary spiral, right? Because most times when you see money getting printed, and that does cause like something like, for example, hyperinflation, like you'd seen in like Zimbabwe or whatever, the inflationary pressures, there was a delayed reaction to the additional money printing, right? I think there is some argument to say that there could be, if we were looking at the UK in like a microcosm, that there might have been an issue with money printing leading to inflation. But then that begs the question, what's happened in other countries where they have also increased their money supply during the pandemic, and then it hasn't caused inflationary pressures because of the difference in supply chain. That is what dispels that issue. It's not necessarily we did MMT and it's fine. It's the money supply issue that we're seeing hasn't caused inflationary pressures elsewhere, so that can't really be to blame if we're going to be doing some kind of comparative study on those two economies. When you look at the ways in which we've seen the inflation pressures because of supply chains, when it's very obvious what's happening with regards to OPEC cartelization, when we look at the ability that we've not taken the steps that we needed to become self-sufficient in our energy generation, in our transition to a greener economy, and things like that, and our over reliance on food imports, like the grain from Ukraine and things like that. These are the actual key issues that we see, which I think is a better way that we can use to talk about dispelling this money supply, monetarist idea of inflation that I guess most monetarists would just kind of default to as their point of view. This fella's got a job on a news channel, makes me think I might achieve my dreams. Yeah, this guy, it's GB News. It's not like a real like news channel, but it's still it's still highly paid, I guess, run by a fucking hedge fund. Yeah, exactly, JD. I mean, I do that's kind of the point that I agree with, right?
Really nice salaries, how they can turn to someone like my mother and say, you know, we're doing this for you. She doesn't work in the real network, right? She's not going to get a pay rise. She struggles to put food on the table, to pay the heating bill. And you look at the inherent hypocrisy with that.
No, there's no hypocrisy. Just join a union. If your mum needs mom is not getting paid enough, join a union and bargain for a higher wage. It's really, really not hard.
Whilst they're living a life of Riley, right? And it's not about workers. This is about, as I say, power and control, right? They are using working class people as pawns in their scheme to overturn a democratically elected government.
This is such weird conspiratorialism. Like, trade unions have literally always existed to be able to benefit the working members that belong to the union itself, right? This doesn't make any sense. Like, and as Jess has, which is funny because Jess has already pointed out in this particular conversation that Keir Starmer doesn't back the strikes and doesn't back the unions in this instance. So if they were trying to use political posturing themselves to overturn the election, they would just put into power someone who said that he doesn't support the strikes. So this conspiracy that Darren's dreamed up doesn't make any fucking sense.
That's what this is. And Sir Keir Starmer, who must have so many splinters, Jess, from sitting on his bottom on the fence, on the middle.
But Keir Starmer hasn't been sat on the fence. His position on this has been very clear. He doesn't support the strikes. He doesn't want the strikes to happen, and he thinks that the government isn't doing enough to stop them happening. And one of those points is correct, and that Grant Shapps hasn't done anything correct here. But he's explicitly said that he doesn't want people on picket, doesn't want front benches on picket lines. He's not pro-strike. There's nothing at all that is in any way not clear in the position that he's taken in regards to this issue. I don't think so, JDM. I've not checked.
Of every issue. He must be very uncomfortable. God knows what he's like getting into bed with his wife on a night. Because he takes both sides, right? He's saying, oh, well, you know, we should, of course, pay workers more.
I mean, the problem is, I guess in my mind, defend it to someone who takes two positions simultaneously, whereas Keir Starmer just has no positions. Keir Starmer is always kind of campaigning on vote for me and support me because I'm not the Tories, whilst having no positions of his own and taking no positions. So he's pathetic. I mean, he is pathetic and he has no convictions. That's definitely true. I mean, whether he's offensive or not, I'll leave that up to viewers at home to judge.
Time for them to get round the table. And then his Labour MPs, you've got Richard Berger, or whatever his name is. How that MP got into Cambridge University, I've got no idea. It says something about our purportedly august institutions, if someone like that thick, frankly, could get in to university as big as that.
I mean, he passed the entrance exams. He got the grades. It's how university applications work, Darren.
But people like him, standing with those picketing, saying he's standing up for the workers. What workers? Just as far as I can tell, the workers are the ones not able to get into their offices. The kids are the ones wanting to work on their exams, unable to get to school. They're not standing for the people of this country. They're standing for power and for control. I don't think that...
No, again, this is just incredibly weird thing that... Let me check the comments. Let me peep the comments, what they're saying here. The railworks need to realise it's 2022, not 1972. Not yet, anyway. How can the weekend for part of the normal week? They're working in a service industry that's operates 7 days a week. I worked in banking for 30 years and I worked weekends and bank holidays for extra pay. Like, literally, it's just that I didn't have it good enough, so no one else can have it good either. Only went to Brighton, didn't even finish his degree. Oh, pot kettle. I hate using like an appeal to hypocrisy, but that is very funny. Well, it's weird. Like, this Darren Grimes is a weird one, right? So basically, he's someone who hates identity politics unless he can engage in identity politics because he is gay and from the northeast and apparent and is a grifty conservative, right? So he'll use that to score id poll points when it kind of actually suits him, and he'll say, "Well, you just hate me because I'm gay and northern, but I disagree with your left wing perspective. So you just hate me for being part of this minority group for not agreeing with you." But then when you do like actual proper identity politics based upon intersectionality or whatever, he'll suddenly call you out as being wokey or whatever, which is very strange to me. But it's very clear to me that he's explicitly trying to kind of chase that kind of niche of being one of the good minorities. Or if more people are working from home, there'll be less on trains. They need less staff. It's not rocket science. I mean, that would be the case if £500 million in profit hadn't been taken out of the rail industry. Passengers are almost at pre-pandemic levels already, despite the fact that huge numbers of people are working from home. And there's still all the profit being taken out. So there is still the money to go to be able to pay the staff and for the staff to have the jobs. Like the services are still running new. They're back to pre-pandemic levels to the services that are being run. So the staff need to be there to be able to staff them, right? The tickets have gone up with RPI, yet the wages haven't. Yet the wages haven't. It's very, very strange. Like I enjoy the kind of the I understand all of how the rail operates, kind of levels of I reckon, right? I don't know if you've seen the Mitchell Webb sketches. Like, well, anyway, I don't know anything about the issue, but I bet I reckon something about it. And that's what basically, I guess I'm looking at the comment section of YouTube videos, so I don't know what I expected. I'm a member of the RMT, and you're correct about them. They do not care about the base which pays to support them. The people in charge have their own agenda, but I do support the strike for reasons which you don't understand. But no, they don't have the agenda was voted on. They had 79% vote for strike. They are actually engaging in like the will of the people. How can you say anything other than they're they're doing someone else's agenda when the agenda was voted on democratically with a huge mandate, more than anything else that I've ever seen as a mandate on any kind of vote? This is a nonsensical comment. He does support the strike for reasons of which you do not understand. Well, can you please tell me? Which they did support the working class in this country instead of world issues. All want us to be treated fairly, have more responsibility to push on us. When I started, the workloads increased tenfold for no remuneration. I mean, at least he understands what the strike is for, which is interesting. But it's very strange how he doesn't see that, RMT engaging in the ballot and then implementing that policy. I don't know what the disconnect is. There's a very strange comment. Government's very lucky the whole country isn't on strike. At time of recording, oh yes, of course. Then there's there's a head of diversity being paid too much money. I mean, clearly they don't need to be paid 160k per year. I mean, there definitely needs to be a more flat pay structure. But that one person isn't that's not £500 million of profit being taken out of the industry to pay for shareholder dividends. Is it really, John? Is that really like the biggest issue that you can have with the kind of the pay structure that's been going on in the rail network? I don't really think it is. I mean, we've got BC&E balloting to strike results are on Tuesday. We've got airport workers definitely are striking. Teachers are voting to strike it too. So we should be seeing more industrial action on a kind of larger scale. So barristers, I forgot about barristers. Is there a nurses strike though? I didn't hear about that one. I mean, I hope there is. If you've got a link to an article, that'd be good. The Conservative Party has moved so far to the left it could be renamed as the Labour Party. Just look at the tax and spend, straight out of the Labour Party handbook. What tax and spend? What have they spent it on? I mean, I guess there was some level to which that they spent money during the pandemic, but that wasn't taxed. That wasn't money they took from by increasing tax during the pandemic. That was money they printed. So I'm not sure what this comment is. And anyway, like tax and spend isn't just a Labour Party handbook. Like the Conservative Party of the post-war period, they taxed and spent or whatever. Junior doctors, thank you, JDM. Appreciate the link there. A real Conservative Party would have done a public service audit and spending review to avoid the need to increase taxes. But they've already said they want to cut public sector workers. What? Does this person not live in reality? Extra income companies earn from additional business would have increased tax income through growth to repay the debt tax increases to the public. I mean, they definitely shouldn't have increased taxes on the public. That is definitely the thing they shouldn't have done. Raise national insurance. And Ben Habib on Question Time that we watched yesterday made that point. I think everyone would agree that the national insurance rise was a horrendous policy. But the new kind of higher corporation tax with kind of a stratification for small businesses, that's a good idea. But you know, it's true that Scargill, the like Scargill's kind of large scale strikes were about like essentially trying to be able to wrestle away some kind of revolution out of the strike action. But that's nothing compared to like that's way far removed from what we're seeing right now. It's a really weird comparison to make. I'm sure if the inflation can be easily solved if the government spends less money. I guess if they spent less money, then suddenly all of the shipping routes would suddenly be functioning better, and the war would stop, and OPEC Plus would stop the cartelization. I'm sure that would all stop if the government just spent a little bit less money. But yeah, that was a pretty bizarre video that we just watched there. Very conspiratorial. But again, there was plenty of just lies, just straight up lies there, like using the rail workers, the train drivers that earn so much money when they're not even represented by RMT. So conservatives lying to push across the ideological point whilst also making claims with no substantiation. What a surprise! Anyway, strikes are based, and future YouTube viewers, please consider liking and subscribing. If you click the bell, it will notify you when I go live and when I post videos. And if you want to go into the description box and follow me on Twitch, YouTube viewers, please do so. I would very much appreciate it. And Twitch,